Hey there, welcome to Why We Roll, a tabletop role-playing game design podcast.
We're your hosts, Chris Pickett, creator of the historical fantasy game Dance Macabre, and Wythe Marshall, creator of the political sci-fi game Stillfleet.
Throughout the show, Chris and Wythe hope to amplify new creative voices. We'll chat with different TTRPG designers, focusing on the world of indie games.
We take a curious approach to game design, working through a range of mechanical and narrative questions that are pertinent to many designers, players, and GMs.
We hope to showcase fresh and even challenging ideas about what makes imagination-based games just so powerful.
Okay, let's find out why we roll.
There we go. And we're live. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you today, Wythe?
Good. So this is Why We Roll, and we're here with Scott Malthouse. Is it Malthouse is the correct last name pronunciation?
Malthouse. Right. Yeah. Fantastic.
Just, I wasn't sure if it was a th or my name has a th in it.
A lot of people say the th,
yeah.
Yeah, I think.
But I assume it's like in medieval, like Malthouse has a meaning.
It's essentially where you would store the malt before making it into beer.
There you go.
Nice.
Well, that leads nicely into a lot of the games that you've actually produced, Scott. I mean, the ones that I know off the top of my head, of course, In Darkest Warrens is a great game that I really have enjoyed. I've not played it, but I own a copy. I've read through it. It's a fantastic read. Romance in the Perilous Land, or Of the Perilous Land. Of the Perilous Land. Arthurian fantasy writ large for your role-playing pleasure. And then, of course, Quill. And I mean, you have quite a few other games that are kind of like, based around medieval England, British kind of experience there. But I mean, what kind of got you into writing games in that genre?
So you're quite right. I think a lot of the games that I do tend to have some form of folklore. They tend to be sort of steeped in British folklore. It's something that I've been interested in for a long time, since I was probably a teenager. And where I live in Yorkshire, in England, it's the biggest county in England, and there's a lot of great stories around, and I think I just really like to mine some of the ideas that there are around both England, but also more recently Wales and Scotland as well, and Ireland. So I think one of the things I'd really love to be a folklorist. I really love to have gone and studied that academically and done that, but I didn't do that. So I figure probably the main way I can really talk and the kind of the language that I can use is more in games. So in part, I think it's a little bit of an education thing. It's getting people to interact a little bit with folklore and with British folklore specifically. So a lot of the stuff in Romance it's all based around British folklore. It's all has analogues to specific British folklore from different parts of the country, and even though each kingdom doesn't necessarily exist in the UK. They all have an analog to a specific location in the UK, and I've taken some of the folklore from those locations and transposed them on. But yeah, it just mostly came from, well, I know this and I'm really passionate about it, so that's the kind of thing I want to write about, that and horror.
That's so cool. I feel like a lot of game designers, it's like you make games about the stuff you wish you could do or in another life you would do. Like I instead of being a scientist, I make art about science. I'd probably be a terrible scientist for a few reasons, but I'm probably better at talking about it in some other way. So games, have been appealing as that register of being able to explore it. So that makes total sense if you know the stories and you want to delve into them, but not in the way that folklorists and anthropologists and archaeologists, do.
Yeah, I think same. I think in another life I would have been a historian, but instead, I'm writing historical fiction game instead. Like that's the road that I've gone down instead.
Yeah, but that I think that's it's a really valid and interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think I think as long as you are interacting with the thing that you're passionate about, and you're producing fiction, you're producing games, it's another avenue for people to go down and interact with that thing. Not everything necessarily has to be I'm writing an academic paper about
Mm-hmm.
this one thing. It could be I've written a game on this, and people are playing it, and they're interacting with uh, the sort of academia in a way that doesn't happen in a university,
Mm-hmm.
or in a library, in a journal, or anything like that. So I think it's just a really interesting avenue to educate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can do both, right? Like there's nothing stopping you from publishing an academic paper, I guess, but right, a
Of
game's
course,
going to
yeah,
reach one audience, academic paper's going to reach another, a Netflix TV show would reach another, and they have different
Yeah.
barriers to entry, different timelines. So I think games are fun because they can be pretty complex, but there still can be things you just make on your own to a
Mm-hmm.
large degree, at least up to a point, which is
sure,
there's a sort of fun in that that's certain arts lend. I mean, it's sort of like if you were making a pot, you could just throw the pot and no one has to, no one tells you what to do. Maybe later to sell it, you'd have to like interact with other people, but
Yeah.
there's that pure creation moment of like, I don't know, I want to do a story about blah. So Scott, could you? I'm really curious because we were saying before the call. I mean, I found out about your work through Chris, which I'm really thankful for. So just reading through some of your work, but how did you get into games? What's your sort of background or?
um, so it was when I was what, like 8 or 9, I think, years old. It all came from Fighting Fantasy, the
Oh, yeah.
Steve Jackson, Ian Livingstone books.
Yeah. Those are
Yeah, it all came from
fantastic.
that. I had a sort of a they're amazing, and they, I think part of it was um like the amazing artwork. So the Russ Nicholson, all these Chris Kelly, I saw this incredible art that was in there that was really gross, but it was
Mm-hmm.
quite dangerous, and it was made for kids, which is bizarre to think about now. But that kind of got me into gaming. Kind of, for those who don't know, they are essentially a choose your own adventure type thing, but with gaming elements. So you have skill, stamina, and luck as your main attributes, and you're rolling 2d6, and you're adding them, and you're fighting along the way, and you're sort of creating maps and things like that. So and that's a really kind of good start. I know a lot of people who have got their start there in fighting fantasy, and then that sort of led on to things like Warhammer, and then eventually D&D third edition when that first launched.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of been continuing on ever since. There, sort of branching out from D&D when I was a teenager, and playing a lot of other things. But yeah, that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah, I love that Fighting Fantasy was one of the first exposures to tabletop gaming. I mean, for me, third edition D&D was like the first thing that I ever picked up. Also alongside Warhammer around the same time in my life.
I was going to say, when you picked up like third edition, what did you make of it? Because I know when I did it, it was both great and incredibly overwhelming to a
Yeah.
teenage me. What about you?
Yeah, I had a similar experience where I was like, and also
Yeah.
similar to you, where it's just like the illustrations really got me. Something that White and I have talked about before is like, in the middle of, I know it's true in second edition and third edition as well. You open up the middle of the book and it's like the armory section, the equipment section. It's just like a full 2-page spread of like swords. And I remember being like, this is awesome. This is the world I want to live in. But then actually reading through the rules and be like, I have no idea what's happening right now. Until like an older friend kind of like shepherded me into it. But yeah, I didn't find the final Fighting Fantasy, not final, the Fighting Fantasy books until I was a little bit older. I played through a number of those in 2020 just because I was like, well, I'm at home alone. I don't know what else to do right now. I'm just going to like barrel through these. But I got to say the illustrations in those, they are extremely captivating. They have that like 80s, early 90s pen and ink, dark, nasty. Like it's something that you see people try to kind of replicate in the OSR now, right? But that's something that those Nicholson, those original illustrations are just so, they draw you in, and yeah, it really makes it a enveloping experience.
I feel that way. There's like a peak period of like the pulpiness matched with a certain level of professionalism in the 90s. But that's nostalgic because I started with second edition, and the earlier stuff to me was less appealing because the art was like too amateurish, frankly. And as you're a kid, I remember being younger. I only started playing them when I was like around 12, but my older brother had the books, and first edition and second edition. I remember looking through the older stuff and being like, I didn't get the appeal as much, and it was like something about the second edition Player's Handbook of D&D that really, and Call of Cthulhu and all of that. That's when I sort of really got in my own imagination. It's probably all nostalgic because it's just like when my brain was able to imagine things enough or whatever, complex stories.
Oh, I mean, I've got it right here. The second edition.
Yeah, that's the one I got.
Yeah, the art is absolutely incredible, and I know you mean kind of looking back at first edition, you've kind of got an amazing Trampier cover, but what's on the inside isn't much of a step up from I suppose what they had in OD&D, really. Which is strange because I think with BX and the art, some of the art in that was really good, and obviously you had Elmore with doing the basic edition as well, and yeah, it felt like a little bit of a misstep there, but yeah, I think Total Redemption with here, just amazing artwork.
Because there's something about the low fidelity that's really interesting, and Chris, as an artist, is really good at capturing elements of that, but with a very masterful, deft touch. But I remember thinking at some point in high school. So later on, I've been playing these games for years, and we're playing third edition, and it just occurred to me like I can draw better than a lot of those early books. I don't think of myself as good at drawing, but if you're like at the level of a high schooler drawing, that's totally cool and chill. And I love indie stuff all the time that I read. But there's something about the professionalism of second edition, and there was an era there where they were putting out a lot of products rapidly that had just a lot of cool stuff in them, both at the level of writing, sentence writing, as well as the art. So I think that was definitely for me when it was like, I definitely want to do this. But sorry, I got us off track. Scott, we're trying to talk about your
no, it's all
your
it's all good. It's all good talking about art.
Do you write and draw? Do you just? I'm sorry, Chris. You should ask questions.
No. I think that that's a good question. So.
So I don't really do. I mean, I do draw sort of just personally, but I've never really had the. I've not really wanted to put that into a book. I think there's two reasons for that. One, I don't feel like with the quality of what everyone else seems to do, it is really going to stand out at all. And two, I don't know how people do it who are both writers and artists of their own book, because that's so much work. It's so much work. And I applaud anyone and admire anyone that's able to do that, because it's madness. So I don't think I would put any of my own art in there. It's not horrible, but I wouldn't say it was anything I'd really want to put out there, really.
Sure, yeah. I will say, as someone who's writing and illustrating their own book, it is madness. And
how do you do it?
I don't know. It goes very slowly, or it's like fits and starts, right? Where it's like I'll spend like 3 weeks really intensely writing, and then a week brain dead, and then 3 weeks really intensely illustrating, and then a week brain dead. So it's just this kind of like constant roller coaster that I'm on. But
it helps if you're very good and fluent in both. You know how to just dive in and address. Because I feel like as a writer at this point, when I start a new project, I know kind of what I want to do, and it doesn't take me long to get into it. When I put, okay, I'm going to spend an hour on this. Whereas like as someone who likes to draw but is not good at it, it would like just figuring out like, oh crap, hands. There's these things you encounter, and you're like, I gotta like Google hand. And I think you Chris probably don't like, that's not an obstruction. So there's more fluidity with your design process when you're using that skill, but
hands are always a roadblock.
But yeah, Scott, how do you want to can you take us through? I mean, again, I'm new to these games, so it's Chris probably has much more interesting, sophisticated questions about sort of their background and stuff, but just on a purely writing design standpoint, like for example with Romance, how did you kind of approach that? How did you write it? Was it fits and starts? Did you do research? do you have any good stories from kind of putting together that book, which is a cool, sort of standout product. It's a little different. There's a lot of fantasy games, but it's a little bit different. So
yeah, so I mean, it started as a self-published game that I put out, which I just wanted to do something that was, I guess, a bit in the OSR, which I really enjoy, but that has a little bit more meat to it if you wanted to approach it more like I guess a traditional game. So something that would have takes inspiration from quite heavily David Black's The Black Hack and a little bit of 5th edition D&D and also a bit of Tunnels and Trolls as well, and various other sort of markers along the way. So that's how it started out, and then when it came to actually writing the full book for Osprey, that I think one of the things that I really wanted to get across was the world building side of it. And I was talking with my editor quite a lot about, well, we want to have these factions in it, and we want to have a really sort of, we don't want to be overwhelming with the world that we're, I guess I was putting together. It still needs that kind of usability. I think one of the things that I really do like about games is the lore. And but sometimes I think they can go a little bit overboard with huge amounts of lore dumps and not making them particularly playable, which I think something that 4th edition D&D did really, really well was everything that put forward was for playability. So everything had a hook. Everything set those neurons firing. So that's the kind of way that I wanted to approach it, rather than do these sort of big kind of turgid lore dumps that I know some people like. Really section it out and spread that setting kind of across the book. But yeah, I think the process of doing it, I tend to just do it every weekend. So I would just take the weekend, generally Sunday, just take most of the Sunday just to get down and write. And I would kind of start with, because I already had the mechanics down essentially. It took I changed a fair bit of that in the final version, but I essentially had what I wanted to do with the mechanics there. So it was more exploring what the perilous land was, what the world was, and I think for me that was the most interesting and gratifying part, where I was sketching maps and figuring out. I mean, it allowed me to use like a good sort of my folklore library. So to go through and to kind of find interesting things, and it was, I think that was probably my favorite part of it. I can just then transfer all of that into the book. So I think generally it flowed pretty well. I don't think there was any points where, I mean, you do get to those points where on a day you just can't think of anything to do at all. You can't think of anything to write. But I think by the very nature of having sort of this collection of folklore books to look through, there was always something that could at least spark something as I was going through and writing it. So it was just a little bit of a voyage of discovery in that way, that I was learning quite a lot while I was writing it, but also learning a lot about fake lore, which is essentially made up folklore that some people have sort of certainly created in sort of the early 1900s to mid 1900s. So very conscious not to put that stuff in there. So
that's interesting.
It's like fake news type thing.
Yeah.
So there's there are quite a few things. There's like in Scotland there's like a werewolf. Apparently there's like a werewolf. There's a friendly werewolf. It's called a wolver, and it goes fishing. But this seems to be quite popular online. But actually, when you look into it, there's no real source for it. So there are things like that I wanted to kind of stay a little bit away from. But it was just a big kind of educational thing. I don't necessarily think there was anything particularly interesting stories that came out of it. I think I tried to approach it in a very sort of workmanlike way, getting this section done and this section done and this section done, and understanding that I was progressing on the way. I didn't want to jump around, and that's just not how I wanted to work. And it seemed to work as sort of my first big book. It felt like it worked okay.
Yeah. Most of your stuff is quite a bit shorter, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, like Heartseeker, which is another game that you've put out. I don't know if you've published it anywhere other than itch, but that's a 2-page OSR game. And then Perilous Land. It's a pretty thick A5.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like to. I really like to do kind of play with small games, because I think part of it is just if I'm really passionate about something, or I get an idea in my head, I just need to get it down there and then. And if I don't do that, it could very well just end up in the graveyard of files that I have. So a lot of the time, the small sort of games that I'm making within a weekend or a week, maybe a month, but as long as I sort of have that momentum, which is why a lot of them are a bit smaller. Obviously, when it comes to doing a bigger commission like Bromance or other things I've done, then I sort of have to take that on the chin and make myself really sort of passionate about it. But thankfully, a lot of the time, because it's something that I've pitched, and I feel that weight of responsibility to make sure I'm getting something over the line for deadline, then that seems to work out okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. How so what is your I basically have so many questions. Are you working full time designing games, or is this a hobby practice? If you don't mind, sort of speaking to that.
Yeah, no. I work full time in a day job, and then the game design is what I do in my spare time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that also puts constraints, because that's been. I mean, that's why I think most of us are operating in that world, and then some of us are operating in a weird liminal space where it's like sort of part time but not full time, and then there are studios that are full time, but that's interesting when you think about the constraints on, like, you have to get certain stuff done because you also just have other things going on.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see, that you have a lot of material, and it doesn't tend to be like I read a lot of stuff on it where you see designers have written a lot where it seems clearly intended for like D&D, Merkborg, and now Mothership. And it's nice. I feel like you have a lot of stuff which is a little bit like I want to lean in and learn more, because it's not exactly clear, how I meant to use it. Which just makes me excited to like, I should publish more like random 2-page ideas that are good, and like, yes, like commit to like, okay, this weekend I have to get it all done.
It's just gonna get it out there.
Yeah. But do you work with so you do have some art. So for example, just to go back to that question of, how are you getting art in these games? Or, when do you do all the design? Like, again, these are real basic questions, but I'm just kind of curious how other people do this, basically.
Yeah, no. So looking through them, the vast majority of what I do it's through public domain art, really. And I'll do the design. I do it all in Affinity. And I think one of those things, I just really want to kind of progress that and learn a little bit more every time I do something. So what I'm hoping is that every time I put something out, it looks a little bit better than the last time I've done something. So I tend to stick to that. I do use some kind of stock art and things like that. I very occasionally do commissioned pieces, but not so much. Yeah, I really love the public domain. I think it's an amazing resource that if you can use it in a way that's interesting and not completely random. I think some people sort of trip up in they'll either use the same kind of images that you find immediately on Google Images when you search for
Right.
medieval hero or something, or they don't quite get the tone right. And I think some of one thing you can do with that is actually build around a specific artist that is in the public domain. So you could get you could use, say, Aubrey Beardsley, for example, who, this incredible fluid black and white sort of line art that's a little bit grotesque and a little bit romantic as well. You could look and you could say, okay, well, I could use all of Aubrey Beardsley's art, but what does that inspire me to do as a game, and then sort of retrofit it, which sometimes I do. I kind of think about, well, what if I see an image, then what game does that conjure and work that way? Which I understand some people might not want to do, because you might just have that idea for a game and you might, okay, well, I just want to get this down. But I do like having that kind of art in there, even if it is just a public domain piece, but it's got to be right.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. And just goes to show that you can kind of find creativity or the kind of spark to make your own game in a lot of different places, a lot of different sources. Mm. And I like that there's a parallel too between your use of public domain art and then also the use of folklore, which is kind of the ultimate public domain, even in terms of generation or generating folklore.
Yeah, I'm just like Disney, I'm going to just use everybody else's stories and make millions off it.
But that's the beauty of role-playing games, right? Is that you can then generate your own stories at the table with it. You're opening up the possibility for people to learn about these different types of stories that exist archetypally everywhere. Yada yada, young, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking through. I mean, you've put so much stuff out, and so much of it is very good, very well written.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I'm really curious about Merry Outlaws. Can you tell us a bit about that and how that came to be?
Right here. Again, this is all about Robin Hood. Well, it's sort of about Robin Hood. It's Robin Hood is dead, and it's what happens after Robin Hood. So, all of the merry men, the outlaws, have gone their separate ways. Some are dead. Some have become sort of wandering nomads or assassins and things like that. But of course, the issues that Robin Hood and the outlaws were fighting against are still there. They've not gone away. So that's the idea behind that. And Robin Hood began as a ballad. It began in the Child's Ballads. So in part, the game is about making your own ballad. So one of the kind of the leveling up and experience system is that once you kind of gain enough experience, as it were, you write a stanza of your ballad based on what you've been doing in your adventure. And the idea would be that once you've reached the end of the game, you have a full sort of folkloric ballad that you can read through and recount sort of how you fared and what your adventures were and things like that. And you have some artifacts that you can look back on and see that it's not just, I guess, a book full of notes. It's something poetic and artistic. So that's that. And again, it's it's a very small, maybe 20 pages, if that. But I figured that's kind of all you really needed, because it's set in the 13th century in England. If you want to learn more about that, just go online and look it up. You look at a book about it. So it doesn't necessarily have a setting, but a lot of people they'll just use the 13th century England, particularly Nottingham, where Sherwood Forest is. And they'll kind of set it there, but it is very sort of medieval. There's no real like magic or anything as part of it. It's a little bit more grounded in that.
Well, that brings me to Chris's work, which I think is one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, is because we've been talking so much about the uses of the medieval versus the fantastic, and people often conflate this, which is a little frustrating if you ever taught history, because there were actually no wizards in medieval times, and many other many other things are historically situated that people take as natural, like money, markets, all these things. So yeah, maybe that I guess that's really all. Just to pass the baton to Chris. Do you have some questions about sort of that aspect of game design and world building and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the things that I was thinking about was, I think, especially with Merry Outlaws, is there's a in the ballads and the stories of Robin Hood, we already have these kind of specific political bents that are happening, right? Where it's like, don't trust the sheriff. All constables are brigands, which I wore my shirt that I designed for you today, which says that on it.
It's amazing.
But yeah, I was curious. Something that I always kind of find interesting when I'm writing. So the game that I'm writing is set in 14th century France, so a little bit after the kind of like setting for Robin Hood. Yeah. If you're going to that 13th century English or British really kind of setting. But it's always interesting to me to like, how do you balance the politics of those settings? It's like because like I personally hate writing stories or writing games that are about the nobility or about like putting yourself, or like in a lot of D&D campaigns, you become rich and you get a castle and you're the lord and things like that. It's like I would rather have it be grounded in a more kind of like quotidian or like workers kind of experience, or I guess like in France it would be the Belain, or in England it would be the peasants, kind of like revolting against the powers that be. So I'm curious how much you engage with the politics of specific time periods. I mean, I know that Perilous Lands is more open in terms of when it's set, but I think that there are still some kind of specificities.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I don't think it's necessarily something I think about too much, other than I think I'm a lot like you in that I don't tend to go for sort of kingdom building and being a lord and things like that. Merry Outlaws is about being an outlaw, and it's about justice for the people. With romance, you are generally, ostensibly, you are just a regular person in an extraordinary situation, and you're the sort of the political side of that is more to do with I suppose the more cartoonish, heightened. There are bad guys and there are good guys, and then there are some people that are stuck in the middle of that as well. So I don't necessarily think that the too much of the work that I do engages with that. Aside from there was some, in fact, I think I have a copy here. There was some work that I did for a game called Darkness of the Demimonde, which is a Victorian pulp horror game. So the idea is that it's a little bit like Van Helsing, the film, or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that kind of thing. And in this, this is in part based on my much smaller game, The Midnight Chimes, which I did for I think it was one of the itch sort of competition jam things. But Raven God Games sort of made this really cool game from it. So the sort of the scenarios that I wrote for this were a little bit more political. So they were a little bit more about. I mean, one is pretty much about how the British Museum has stolen a lot of historical artifacts, and that's essentially what it's all about. Or it's about colonialism and that kind of thing. So I think where it's appropriate, and I feel like I want to weave in, I'll weave in. But on the most part, I think I'm a little bit more concerned with the I suppose the folklore and the feel of a place, and not getting too much. Because I suppose with romance, what I could have done, and I was sort of thinking about, was, well, obviously the ways that barons and baronies worked in 15th, 16th century Britain, and the feudalism and things like that. I could have gone like a lot into that and been a little bit more like Pendragon, for example. But that I felt that kind of Pendragon already does it and does it really, really well. But also, I didn't feel like I wanted people to be tied to that kind of political hierarchy. Um, which is also why women can be knights in romance. Anyone can be, and that is kind of written into the game's lore because. If you want to fight darkness, you want as many people as possible. It doesn't matter if they don't have this noble blood. That will just limit you. So if you can prove yourself, then that's absolutely fine. So I think that's probably more where I've taken those decisions, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense if your main focus is kind of like just putting the folklore forward. But yeah, I do like that. You can be an equal opportunity evil fighter in romance. I like that opens that up. Because that's a weird thing too. Like when you get into more like kind of historical, not simulationism, but something akin to it, where it's like I read a lot of medieval horror, right? So like Between Two Fires, stuff like that. And for me, there's always a question of like, well, like how much are we trying to reproduce the kind of like social striations that they had at the time, or gender-based striations, things like that, and how much are we trying to push against it? And in a lot of medieval horror, it's kind of like not really doing that work, and that's something that I always feel very concerned about. And maybe sometimes it is as simple as just being like, I mean, I know that when you open up the game Helm, there's a blurb that's basically like, if you have a problem with women wearing armor and kicking ass, then this isn't the game for you. So there's the door.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I recently played Munchkin again for the first time in 15 years. For me, it's still not my cup of tea, but it's very popular, and it's bizarre that still it's like they're printing a game where like you choose male or female, and there's artifacts, which it's all just puns. It's like the broadsword because women are broads, and I was like, A, that still isn't funny like 15 years later, but B, it's just like it would be so simple to redesign very slightly, and then it wouldn't raise all the questions about non-binary gender expressions. It just sort of like opens up a lot of can of worms that it doesn't pay off in any meaningful, interesting way. It's not a game about gender, so sort of like why do they even have gender?
Strange, just puns for puns' sake.
Yeah,
puns for puns' sake. Yeah.
Yeah,
but I guess the deeper thing you guys are talking about is this one of the perennial complaints of genre fiction in general, and the response in the sort of English department, in science fiction studies is that that's really true, that people write themselves into a corner where they're reproducing. The genre fiction is great and it's very powerful, but you can end up sort of slavishly reproducing the same narrative structures, which come with all the baggage of whenever they were invented. So I mean, classic examples would be the Lovecraftian weird, and up until you could argue that while people used it in different ways, it wasn't until you get the more modern writers like Matt Johnson and Victor LaValle, who are kind of writing from a place of being a racialized person who likes reading Lovecraft and likes the stories, and then is saying, well, what if the main character was black? How would that completely change their experience of eldritch horror? That you kind of reinvent that genre, it becomes a new subgenre. But I definitely think D&D and all of the games that spawn have suffered a little bit from that, where sometimes we're chasing our own tail with sort of reproducing. So I like what you said, like Pendragon does X well, so I'm just not going to try to do X exactly the same. And I've definitely encountered that with sci-fi, where it's like, yeah, there's a game that already does, if you want to play a very certain narrative structure, you can find that. I'm going to try to invent something that I don't think I've seen, so just really just a comment, not a question.
No, it makes complete sense. There are things already out there. There are, if you talk about history, there are textbooks. There are, there's historical fiction that sort of stays with that. I suppose the historical fact side of it. But if you're putting out a game, it's completely up to you how you want the players to interact with it, and have your own narrative as part of it. And if you want to update it, and if you want to make sure that it's you want to put in that no fascists should be playing it, that's your prerogative. That's what you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is always a funny question of like, how do you balance historicity, right? It's like, how much historicity do I want to include to get the vibe or the feeling that I'm trying to elicit, but also not, like White said, slavishly kind of reproduce problematic social situations that we're trying to move away from at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Or what aspects of history you're interested in? Because even historical fiction, I mean, look at like In the Name of the Rose or something. I mean, it's a take, it's a take on a specific dimension of history. It's not a history textbook on purpose, and it's not a dig. It's just it's a literary device. It's a convention for a setting where the reader kind of knows some stuff about the setting already. So I think it's interesting what you're saying about merry bands and like the reader knows something about Robin Hood, probably not a lot about the actual history. That's okay. You can start there and kind of work with different people. And when you're in different cultural settings, there's a lot of sensitivity and there's questions that arise there. But I take it, Scott, you're in a way you're mining like what's around you, and you're saying, oh, there's still all these. If I'm hearing correctly, there's still all these stories, all these elements where there's more than the default genre understanding of Robin Hood is, what's his name from the 90s with a bow and arrow. It's there's other things going on that are interesting that I can make a game out of, which I love that.
Kevin Costner.
Yeah. So, that's the man's name. Yeah. I was going to say Kurt Russell, and then I was like, wait, I really want to see the version in my head, the Mandela Effect version, where it was like Kurt Russell with an eye patch and a bow and arrow.
I would watch that. I would watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think of Robin Hood Men in Tights, which also has not aged well, turns out. It's aged about as well as Munchkin has.
No, that's great. But well, I think that's the thing. So the reason why I tend to go for the folklore around me is that I kind of feel like if I was going to do something about the folklore of I don't know, Appalachia or the folklore of Colombia or something, incredible, super rich folklore, so interesting. I just don't feel like I can do that justice because that's not necessarily my culture. I feel like that's someone else can do a great job of that. That's not really up to me to do it. But I think when it comes to the sort of the British folklore, I feel like I can. I feel like I have a little bit more license to do that, and not that I'm saying that I would necessarily be offended if someone else in the world wanted to do something about British folklore. I think that's amazing, but I think that's probably more the dynamics of colonialization.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know your lane in those regards, right? It's like I'm gonna do what I know and what I can accurately represent, and let other people represent what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Well, also speaking of genre and kind of translating from older versions of genre fiction into what we have now, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about astounding interplanetary adventures as well. I mean, Wythe is our resident sci-fi expert. I'm sure you've got some questions about this game. But yeah, I mean, what kind of brought about this? It seemed you've got Quill, you've got Perilous Land, you've got Darkest Warrens, you've got Merry Outlaws, you've got all this kind of stuff. And so, what kind of brought about interplanetary adventures for you?
I really like Flash Gordon.
Good answer. Yeah, there you go.
Pretty much for me, I think. Yeah. I really love pulp. Just any sort of pulp. Sci-fi, horror, sword and sorcery, and I think one thing that hasn't necessarily been mined so much is this sort of retrofuturism of Flash Gordon, and that kind of style. There's the Savage Worlds Flash Gordon, which is I own it. I've not played it, but I like to mine that just for ideas. But yeah, for me, there was not really anything out there that could get you to the table playing that kind of that two-fisted rocket ships type game in a very short space of time. Like in Darkest Warrens was sort of designed to do. That's really where it came from. It came from I read Flash Gordon on Sundays. Every Sunday I get it mailed to me. I'm a big fan of it, so I just wanted to do something that was like, hey, I can just play a Flash Gordon game without with the serial numbers filed off and that kind of thing. It's great.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of sci-fi games out there, but yeah, I agree with you that it's funny you mentioned retrofutures, and that was how Ethan, the artist I collaborate with on Stealthfleet, we and all our games actually. I mean, we're doing his retro fantasy game next, which is sort of almost like his take as a folklorist. He's not a folklorist, but on Arthurian Legends and stuff, but it's sort of filtered through like early video game, JRPG 90s video games, and then you make a D&D out of that. But in terms of the science fiction, we were doing art and science events in Brooklyn, and we had a whole show called like Retrofuturism, and we were looking for artists who sort of had this aesthetic, because it did seem like the technology can and has gone a lot of different ways. You tend to naturalize things very quickly. I mean, smartphones came out like after I graduated college, so it was like a real noticeable difference. But nowadays it's like almost it would be hard to recover the feeling of not having this like powerful computer in my pocket. But there's so many sort of, even just something as banal as that, there's so many retrofuturistic versions of what phones could have looked like, and the big brick phones, and it's sort of cultural imagery that still exists. The devices still exist. There's e-waste. Some people still use them for a variety of reasons, but in every, you could just go backward in time and find more and more of that. So I think there is, to your point, a lot to be mined from kind of there's a few different things. One is like pathways that we didn't take, and another is straight up pulp. It's sort of like mixing genres within a science fictional framework. So suddenly a cowboy shows up, suddenly a knight shows up, tentacled horror shows up, a wizard shows up, but they're all on a spaceship. And I think that's a very different vibe from kind of darker, harder SF, which is tended to be which tends to be still things that I play. I tend to not try to make it too wacky, but there's an edge of pulpiness in my own work that I appreciate that you did a pulp game, because I think that's very fun. Like the phrase plutonium ants, for example. The fact you have plutonium ants.
Big plutonium ant. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd get the plutonium ant t-shirt, right? Like,
yeah. And the thing is that when you're doing a game that is so so light, so small, and you try to get as much into a small sort of area, bit of real estate as possible, you need to do a couple of things. One is you need to work in a genre that people understand, and that they have, they can sort of immediately think, right, Flash Gordon, that's the kind of feel this is going for. And the other thing is that you sort of have to be, I suppose, as descriptive as possible in a very short. You need to be succinct with sort of, say, your bestiary. Like a plutonium ant doesn't really have much of a description around what one is, but you can imagine one. Even though those words just don't belong together. So there's kind of that challenge of producing something that's not necessarily, I suppose, you don't want it to be too vanilla. You don't want it to be just like little green men.
Yeah, or mega ant isn't as interesting. Plutonium ant's better. Yeah,
that kind of thing. You still want your spin on it, and you want it to be evocative, but at the same time, you don't have a lot of space to play with. So the challenge there as someone who writes a lot of light games is, well, how do you do that and have that conjure that image in somebody's mind, or at least give them some creative license around what that is, what kind of creatures are there, what are the worlds like. And you might only have a paragraph to do that, but as long as you can do that as evocatively as possible, then you can. People can play games for years just using that kind of one rule set. So I think that's kind of important when it comes to creating that like really small kind of games. And you mentioned old phones.
Yeah.
Nokia.
Right. Is that your current phone?
It's one that I had. So I tried to sort of detox from my smartphone, and I went for a month just using this, and I realized that since literally everything is set up for smartphones, it was very, very difficult to do. So it now lives in this little drawer.
I mean, good on you for trying to take a break from it. That's something that I entertain all the time and never actually pull the trigger on.
It is so difficult, honestly.
Yeah, it's hard.
So many distractions.
Well, I appreciate the parsimony of having to find the exact right weird phrase, because I also noticed that a lot of writers who do sci-fi, I think it's also maturity and different interest in the genre of games and writing games for different reasons. But as a writer, reader, an English studies person, I really like the evocative phraseology and spend a lot of time thinking about it, just as he said, every single possible type of thing. And okay, I have to have the best version. So it's not a thing that gives you mutations. It's not a mutation chamber. It's the gene shuffler. What does that really mean? I mean, if you shuffle it's sort of like plutonium plus ant equals dead ant. shuffling around your genes at random equals you die, really. But in a softer SF setting, instantly what that's going to do. And I think those are sort of fun design constraints, and they're fun little challenges that make the writing of games different, but similar to writing like a novel. But it sort of doesn't matter. In a novel, I might have to think about some reason why there's more explanation. But to your point, in a game, you can kind of just have gene shuffler in bold, and then a colon or an end dash, and then the rule. And the reader's like, oh, right, of course, the gene shuffler. Of course, the plutonium ants. Yeah, okay, cool. They have 3 damage, 3 armor. Got it.
Yeah, and I mean, something that does that really well. Obviously, it has the benefit of having amazing art, but Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is generally here's a really evocative name, and you generally have the mechanics, and you might have a bit of flavor text, and that's kind of it. Aside from having the image, which does a lot of the heavy lifting, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you're lucky if you get flavor text on most newer Magic cards. Anyway, there's usually usually just rulings. It's like just mechanics because there's so much going on now.
It's a game for lawyers by lawyers, dressed as D&D.
Yeah, it's great.
I mean, it's fun, but I also like arguing about technicalities. So, obviously, target audience.
Have I got the game for you?
I think so I don't know how many questions, Chris, you have left. I have one just kind of curious line of questioning, but we can come back to it. I don't know if you wanted to jump in, Chris, with any specific things.
Go for it, please.
I was just going to ask Scott about playtesting. This is, again, another thread we've sort of been picking at, and in part because I think as we were just talking about, Chris and I were talking about getting older, I don't know, like I think it's harder the longer you design games and new games, and in a changing environment with the pandemic and Discord and whatnot, there's some real opportunities to like meet awesome people. But just coming from a con where I was running 3 sessions of my games in person, it is a different energy, and with complete strangers, I mean, you will get more brutal feedback than with your friends, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just curious if you play test all of your games, and if so, do you have like your own friends? Or are you doing a lot on Discord, or how would you do you have any recommendations for designers who might be listening to this, who are thinking about, how am I going to kind of make sure these mechanics actually work? We tend to be big fans of playtesting, but that's,
Yeah, no, I'm really consistent in how I do it. So, in some cases, it'll be something that I put out, and generally it'll be something that's either free or doesn't cost a whole lot. And what'll happen is I'll get emails saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And it has this sort of, I guess, organic kind of playtesting to it. That tends to happen on the much smaller games I play. When it comes to the sort of the commission games that I do, I have a group that I do that with. So it's my sort of the home group that I have that we sort of weekly meet weekly for. And then I'll kind of have some just select people that I know from the internet that will kind of come on, and, as you say, we'll play on Discord, and we'll talk a little bit about what they liked, what they didn't like too much. I don't really. I think I'd quite like to, but I think I'm a little bit afraid of what it's going to say. But I'd like to do like a proper form, like give people and things like that. But I'm a little bit too lazy for that, so I just get them just to say what they don't like about it, or what a bit that they think should be part of it. And then sometimes I'll just completely ignore that because I completely disagree with them. But yeah, a lot of the time it is just the kind of the core group that I have and play with, because I in part write the books for them as well.
Right.
This is the group that I have in my mind when I'm writing it. So it's kind of for them, and that might be that might be a counterintuitive thing to do, but at the same time I think it just gives me quite a bit of direction when it comes to creating something. It's like, well, as long as Dave likes it, then that's okay.
I like that, the rule of Dave.
The rule of Dave. Yeah, we all have our Dave.
We've all got a Dave, I think. Yeah, we've all got a couple of Daves.
Yeah. How do you tend to go about it?
Chris, do you wanna take that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think much in the same way. I have a small group of friends who are generally down to play any kind of game. So whenever it's something that I'm writing, they're here for it. I also have a small Discord where I just invite people that are interested and try to schedule things on there, which I've been also kind of lazy about lately. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly, I think for me, it's mostly in-person playtesting with kind of a small group. And then I have been doing more stuff just over Discord with people that I don't know, which I think, Wythe, you're right. I do get much more, I don't want to say honest, but much more like unfiltered feedback. Let's call it that instead. But yeah, I mean, I'm not as systematic about it as you are with it seems most things, Scott. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're going to play when we play. I got this new thing that I just worked on. Let's get something together tomorrow night or whatever like that. But yeah, similar small group of friends.
Yeah, I mean, we started publishing. I mean, I've been playing with friends forever, and then with the pandemic and with my friends having kids, there was a noticeable sort of downturn. But we definitely moved a lot to Discord, and with the idea of like, oh, I'm going to publish a game as a company, I mean, that became about that game on that game's Discord. But because now we do lots of other things, it's all on that Discord, if that makes sense. So now we're going to cons more just as of this Gen Con. So it's kind of been back to and we've done events consistently in New York, but it's a little bit different now to sort of try to say consistently, like once a month, we're going to be at a game store, just introducing people to the games. And I think that is, it's valuable at both. It's valuable to have friends who know your work and valuable to have strangers. But yeah, Forum, I hadn't thought of that for this purpose, but Forum, I think a Forum isn't a bad idea just because, as you said, you could just ignore it if you're like, I'm not going to, like I feel like that's true about all writing is people can suggest really good ideas that have nothing to do with what you want to do as a writer. And you're like, that's a good idea. That's not what I'm doing here.
Yeah, and I think it can be helpful to tell them from the outset. This is what I'm going for. This is my, these are my design principles. And then at the end of it, did I hit the mark there? Did you feel that is right? Do you feel that and you're not going to get that from just one session. You'll get it from obviously a bunch of them. Particularly if you've got a game that is a campaign game. But again, there is really only so much playtesting you can do as an indie designer, as an indie developer. You've not got the sort of the Paizo and the Wizards of the Coast, hundreds of thousands of people that can submit all sorts of forms for you and play, gajillions of hours of it. You have the time that you have, and you've at one point you've kind of got to put something out there, even if you think, okay, well, actually, what, some of the areas maybe haven't been playtested as much, but then again, people either tend to fix that, or it's not such a big deal as you thought it was, or if it's a sort of PDF that just lives online, then that can just be updated. So that's kind of how I sort of see it.
Yeah, I definitely think the iterative. I mean, the idea that everything is a PDF. Is how I think about it still, even though now that we've done print books, it's like, oh, that's definitely not it. Like that's like an expensive thing to correct, but but then it's just both. They're just slightly different documents. One is a nice objet, and the other is this PDF that you can always perfect.
Oh, that's the beauty of printing a second and third and fourth edition, and slowly raking in more money over time, because that's what we're here for.
We're definitely. I wish that was the case, but it was never the goal.
Chris is just counting the money.
Right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I'm not actually.
What is that? A stack of?
I'm not actually sitting on a couch. I'm sitting on a stack of bills with fabric draped over. I wish that would be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if New York was like it is in TV and movies, that's how our lives would be. But instead, we live in these tiny closet-sized apartments.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I mean, okay, so I was going to say that's probably my last question I had sort of in my mind. There's so much we could talk all day, Scott, and it's really nice to meet you. We should have you back on when you next have a book coming out or a project you want to work on, or maybe you want to play test. Chris and I have played some games, mostly each other's, on this brand new show. So we could also play test stuff. Just throwing out there. Yeah. I think that's something, we can consider.
I like the sound of
that. If you've got any pulpy adventures you want to send us on, I think we'd both be here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I do. I've got something coming out next July with Osprey.
Oh, nice.
Which is a horror game.
Cool.
So if you're into weird folk horror, that's what it is.
Yeah,
huge fan.
Count me in. I love that. I love that.
We're big fans of folk horror.
Cool.
Well, great. Well, then you heard it here. We got to have you come back and run your folk horror game if you want. Do a 2-3 hour play test with a couple of us. Chris, did you have any last questions or anything you wanted, that we haven't been able to touch on?
No, I'm set. Also, thanks for joining us, Scott. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, then, Scott,
thank you so much.
Where can people find you? Anything you want to plug? Like that horror game, or if it's too early, then anything else. I know we've mentioned some of the games, but
no. So yeah, I'm on Blue Sky, Scott Malthouse. You just search it and find me. Same with Mastodon as well. And I have a blog, TrollishDelver.com, which I'm back to updating as well. So I think I'm okay in saying this because it's now out there in the public domain on the Bloomsbury and the Osprey site. But in next July, I've got a book coming out, The Terror Beneath, which is I've coined it a weird folk horror role-playing game, which uses the gumshoe system. It's an investigative game based in the 1920s, and it is heavily inspired by the works of Arthur Machen, the Great God Pan, the White People, all of that good stuff. So it's a Machen game. So really excited to be sort of sharing more a little bit closer to the time when that comes out. But yeah,
that's very exciting. I just read the Great God Pan for the first time a couple of weeks ago, actually. Maybe three or 4 weeks ago, but yeah, fantastic. Very excited for that.
Yeah, no, I love it. I've never heard another designer reference Machen. I mean, he sort of passed over in the American context because of Lovecraft and the Lovecraft circle. Yeah. So there's a lot there that is actually pretty different in certain ways. Even though there's some, the pulp writers took inspiration from some of his work, but very interesting. And as usual, we'll have to have you on and talk about history and horror, which are big themes. And today we didn't talk too much about horror, so there's more to delve into. Congrats on that game.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to it. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah. And with that, I guess this has been Why We Roll. And Scott Malthouse, thank you again for your time. And everybody check out Scott's work at Trollish Delver Games. And we will be back in a week with some more game design talk. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Why We Roll. Our theme music is by the brilliant Sam Tyndall and Arcline. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on Twitch and what used to be Twitter at Why We Roll, and on Instagram at whyweroll.pod.
You can find out more about Dance Macabre at timespaceplace.itch.io/dance-macabre.
You can find out more about Stillfleet at stillfleet.com. Thanks for listening.
Hi there, I'm Hugh from Poderation. If you like today's show, why not check out Dungeons & Dragonfruits, the bizarre, strange, and queer in every sense of the word D&D podcast. Join 5 friends as they laugh, learn, and adventure their way through the weird, wonderful world of Widdershins, where dragons hatch from trees and have adventures of all forms in every shape and size. Available wherever you can get your podcasts.